It fired 62 rockets into Israel, and Israel is hitting back. In Gaza, a warning from the UN. Famine is looming. Only a couple of bakeries for more than 1 million people. Bread is like gold.
اليوم اقسم بالله 3 يمكن 10 ساعات وانا واقف من الصبح.
I swear today I have been standing for 10 hours to get this bag. This is the status quo in the country. Only 1 or 2 bakeries for all Rafah. We want more than 1 bakery. There should be at least 10.
Long days of hunger and of war. Gazans hold little hope Blinken's tour will change anything. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Let's take a look now at the weather. Morning's papers in our press preview.
Anyway, I can't wait to see your world of flying cars, normal weather, and new TV characters that don't just rehash old stuff. Poor bum had so much hope.
Is Sky News, our top stories. Residents across the UK have been able to leave their homes as floods described as biblical reach record levels. Boeing passenger jets are grounded after the fuselage on an Alaska Airlines plane rips open mid-flight. And the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, has told Sky News he's confident that the US Constitution will hold during this year's contentious presidential election. Now, Rishi Sunak has said he wants to focus on tax cuts and indicated the economy could be the battleground for the next election. A cut to national insurance has now come into force, but another by-election and questions about the integrity of one of his ministers could threaten the PM's plans. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has the latest from Westminster.
The Prime Minister's come out fighting in an interview in the Sunday Telegraph in which he has pledged to cut taxes, but to do that, cut public spending and particularly targeting welfare with cuts there too. Now, the Prime Minister has said that he wants to cut taxes. He wants this to be a dividing line between the Tories and Labour at the next general election. In his interview in the Sunday Telegraph, he says, "I want to keep cutting people's taxes. There's no way we can do that unless we restrain the growth in the public sector and government spending. That will be a contrast between us and the Labour Party at the next election." He's delivered a similar message in an article in The Sun on Sunday. No doubt the talk of tax cuts will delight right-wing Tory MPs, may alarm some Tories in the Red Wall seats, however. But whilst the PM's come out fighting with this message about tax cuts, there's another headache for him because one of his junior ministers, that's Paul Maynard, who is a junior pensions minister at the DWP, MP for Blackpool North and Cleveland, is in trouble over expenses claims. Now, it has been alleged that he has been using taxpayers' money for political purposes, which is against the rules laid down by the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. Remember, that's the body set up after the expenses scandal of 2009. Well, he's under pressure from opposition MPs, Labour and Lib Dems. They're calling on the government to suspend him from the Conservative Party, take the whip off him. The government, however, has responded by saying it's a matter for IPSA. But it's yet another headache the Prime Minister could do without, as he aims to talk about tax cuts and dividing lines with Labour in the run-up to the election.
OK, time now for a look at today's newspapers with Barbara Serra.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Sunday Telegraph says the Prime Minister has pledged to curb benefits and government spending to fund tax cuts before and after a general election. But the Observer says Rishi Sunak will face an election headache when a new report is published describing how the Conservative government failed to prepare the country for the COVID-19 pandemic. The Sunday Times leads with the continued calls to exonerate hundreds of sub-postmasters who were unjustly convicted during the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. The Sunday Express says new figures reveal criminal gangs behind small boat crossings in the Channel have made nearly £500 million since the crisis began. The Sun on Sunday claims Kate Garraway made a desperate attempt to return to the UK with her husband, Derek Draper, after her late husband fell ill whilst receiving specialist care in Mexico. The Mirror says Prince Andrew will resist attempts to remove him from his Windsor mansion after his relationship with convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein was thrust back into the spotlight. Meanwhile, the Sunday Mail says the Duke of York is facing further scrutiny after documents revealed Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, was forced to search for the Duke's name in her phone alongside a number of explicit terms. And after a week in which it seemed we all fell in love with darts, the Daily Star says hitting the bullseye is a great way to stay mentally and physically sharp. There you go, a New Year's resolution right there. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And Theo and Amy are with us now. Thank you so much for having gone through some of these front pages. Okay, let's start with the front page of the Sunday Times, which we can have a look at now. Post Office fury intensifies, and this, of course, relating to the Post Office Horizon scandal, of which, we're talking about a lot now, but had been going on for ages, and no one was really mentioning it.
I remember covering this story when I was working for Press Association Newswire Service back in 2010, 2011. It was an adjournment debate late on a Wednesday, or a backbench business debate on a Thursday, and you'd write the story up, but nobody ever was really interested. It never got picked up. It was quite complicated. It was about a computer system. You had complaints, you had denials, and the story never really landed in any of the newspapers or websites. Fast forward, and now, of course, we've had this extraordinary dramatisation on ITV, and people are really understanding the scale of what has happened, the pain, the misery, the hurt, the prosecutions, the bankruptcies. People have died without ever getting justice. Dozens of people, sub-postmasters, have died without ever getting justice. And now this is going to be the story, I think, that's going to certainly dominate the first half of next week when kids return from their Christmas recess.
In the TV drama, but also just all the interviews that we're seeing, is just the human angle and the misery and the shame that it caused so many people. But going back to the Sunday Times, what is the Sunday Times saying specifically about this, Amy?
I think it's in the word fury, isn't it? There is an absolute public fury about what happened and what was got away with. So now there's growing pressures for all the prosecuted sub-postmasters to be completely cleared. At the moment, 93 convictions have been overturned out of 700 that were prosecuted, 700 plus actually. There's also questions around the involvement of Ed Davey, who received letters from postmasters in his constituency, but when he was Minister of the Post Office at the time.
Postal Affairs, yeah.
I think there were quite a few letters that were not responded to, so there's questions there. But I think he's saying, he was in the same situation as so many people he didn't know, because the Post Office was just flat out denying everything. There's also a petition to strip Paula Venables, who was the CEO of Post Office, of her CBE. 760,000 signatures already on that. I mean, the thing, I would have thought that would have been a given, that the CBE would be gone by now. Interestingly, Alan Bates, he was approached and offered a similar honour, and he turned it down because he said, well, if she's got one, it can't mean very much.
Okay. How damaging do you think this will be for all involved, Theo?
I think it's going to be hugely damaging for the reputation, but I think actually now we're finally going to start to see justice. And I think what's interesting is if you look at the MPs involved, you're looking at Kevin Jones, who's up in Durham, you're looking at David Davis, the senior Tory MP over in Halton, Price and Howden. It's got cross-party support now for action from really senior MPs from right across the political divide. And I think that's going to make a difference because actually Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, is expected to come out and say what needs to happen is the post office needs to be taken out of the appeals process. So if you want your conviction overturned, it's just simply a question of lodging that appeal. It's not going to be contested, and therefore you can get justice much quicker. And then the payouts due to happen by August. But we've had so much feet dragging by the post office. That process needs to be sped up, and those payments need to be made quickly and in a timely fashion so people can really start to move on.
People still coming forward, we
Absolutely.
don't know that. We're going to have to move on now to the Express, page 7. An intriguing headline. Chancellor insists the future is bright. I have to say, Amy, I'm not sure optimism is what I would have defined as the dominant mood right now. So what is the Chancellor talking about?
Well, you're wrong, according to Jeremy Hunt, because he's insisting the future is bright, which is surprising, considering we have the highest tax burden since World War II. We have record inequality, last seen in the Victorian era. However, many children didn't even receive Christmas presents this year because child poverty is so high. But don't worry, because Jeremy Hunt is going to cut tax. However, what he isn't going to tell you is he's going to freeze the income tax threshold, so you'll probably end up paying more anyway. It's like, I heard an analogy today, it's like he nicked £1,000 and left you £1 to find in the sofa.
Theo, what do you make? Not so much of that analogy maybe, but of what Jeremy Hunt is saying.
It's an election year, and doom and gloom doesn't win votes. So he's trying to strike an optimistic tone, saying there's a stark choice in British politics today, and he wants to create an economy that rewards hard work. And he's painting this picture that we're coming out of the war in Ukraine, the energy price shock, that obviously we saw sky-high energy bills, the COVID-19 debt, and actually setting Britain on a course for a better half for the decade.
He reckons he's changing gear. Bit late for that, no?
They're going into an election, they need to have some optimism, and they need to show, the whole point of Rishi Sunak when he took over from Liz Truss was you had the chaos, they're putting that behind us, and then he was going to put the country on a better footing. And then you could go, his idea was that you could go to the country and say, look what I've achieved in 18 months, give me another go, rather than taking a chance on Keir Starmer. So to simply go back and say, well, actually, the economy isn't fixed, everything's still broken and it's not working, isn't going to win any votes.
But it's like you can have this frothing whirlpool of chaos going on, but as long as you shout tax cuts a few times, all will be well.
Speaking of which, let's go to the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. In the headline there, Sunak, he gave the Telegraph an exclusive interview. Rishi Sunak saying, I'll cut tax by curbing welfare. So, Amy, you brought it up. What do you make of this interview by Sunak?
So, Rishi Sunak has pledged to curb benefits when 40% of people on benefits are in work. As I said already, we've got record levels of inequality. And what's incredibly expensive for a country is dealing with poverty and inequality. I find this absolutely offensive, to be quite honest, because it's just the arrogance for Sunak to say, I believe in the nobility of work and I believe work is central to people's lives, as if people receiving welfare don't work or don't want to work. I think this is just typical. It's as if they haven't learned from the past. This is tried and tested. This is austerity 2.0, isn't it? It didn't work the first time, it won't work this time, but it might impress a few Conservative voters who like to blame the poor.
Theo, a lot of the talk around tax cuts has been around inheritance tax over the past couple of days. So what do you make of this?
He seems to be shying away from that inheritance tax cut. Now, of course, inheritance tax is only on I think it's top 4% of estates. It raises about £7 billion a year. It's not going to win over votes. And there's
It does, though. People love it. So, like,
Well, it's not
26
gonna,
people think they're going to pay it.
You have the aspiration argument. I know the way you have.
It's the most misunderstood tax going.
People might think that they would have an estate which is worth so much money that they would have to pay inheritance tax. But actually, the schism is there's a schism in the Conservative Party, and it seems to be the ones in those MPs in the red wall seats who are actually saying, hold on, this isn't something that's going to benefit our constituents if we cut inheritance tax. Let's do more around national insurance income tax. And I think that's where Sunak is siding, going with this particular interview in the Sunday Telegraph.
I'm going to have to stop you there. We have to go to a break. I'm sure we'll discuss this at length, seeing as it's an election year. So more of the stories making tomorrow's